My name is Aria Lawson, and I'm 23 years old. When this part of my story begins, I'm not sleeping on a bus stop bench or coughing my lungs out in some ER. I'm sitting in a glass-walled corner office on the 12th floor of a downtown building with my name etched on the door in frosted vinyl. Aria Lawson, founder and CEO, Northline Logistics. If you'd pause that moment, you'd see everything that looks like success. A skyline view, a desk that doesn't wobble, employees who knock before coming in. You'd never guess that 5 years earlier, my address on a hospital wristband was literally printed as unknown. That morning, my office manager, Nina, knocked once and slipped inside, a manila folder in her hand and a strange look on her face. Behind her, rain streaked down the windows, turning the city into smudged silver lines. Got another application for the account coordinator position, she said, dropping the folder onto my desk. Strong background. I think you'll want to see this one yourself. She said it casually, but something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I flipped the folder open, saw a clean, carefully formatted resume, communications degree, 3 years in PR, some logistics coordination at her last job. On paper, she looked like half the ambitious 20-somethings trying to break into this industry. Then I saw the name at the top. Sienna Lawson. Same last name as mine. Same date of birth. I knew by heart from all those lopsided childhood birthday parties. Same hometown, Springfield. For a second, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. It was that surreal. The office seemed to tilt, the soft hum of printers and phones, in the hallway fading into a low buzz. I read the name again, slower this time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something safer. They didn't. Nina kept talking. Her references check out. Former employer says she's good with clients, strong on presentations but needs structure. I figured, with the last name and all, maybe. Schedule her for Tuesday at 9, I cut in. My voice sounded calm, detached, like this was just another resume, just another candidate. The kind of voice I'd learned to use in boardrooms full of people who underestimated me on site. Nina nodded, relieved to have a decision. You got it, boss. When the door clicked shut behind her, the office felt too small and too bright at the same time. I leaned back in my chair and stared at that name. Sienna, my little sister, my parents' miracle child, the girl they threw their future at while handing me a crumpled 20 in the rain and telling me to be independent. 5 years. 5 years since I'd watched our front door close behind me and waited, freezing, for someone to come after me. No one did. Behind me on the wall hung 3 framed things. A hospital wristband with unknown where the address should have been. A faded $20 bill. The first major contract Northline Logistics ever signed. They were my private altar of cause and effect. What they gave me, what the world called me, what I built anyway. My phone buzzed once on the desk, a text from Ethan. Coffee. Have you eaten? I stared at the message, at his name. Ethan Rivera, my boyfriend. The one person in my life who didn't treat my worth like it was up for debate. The man who could look at a mess of code or a routing algorithm and untangle it while handing me a protein bar because he knew I'd forget lunch. I typed back. Later. Big interview just popped up. I didn't explain. Not yet. Some wounds still felt too raw to name, even with someone who'd sat next to me through 2 a.m. server crashes and contract negotiations. I set my phone face down, focused on the rain. From the outside, the Lawson family looked like a generic suburban brochure. 3-bedroom house in Springfield with a white picket fence and hydrangeas lining the front walk. Dad, Peter Lawson, ran a small auto repair shop after bailing on his teaching job. Mom, Helen, kept books for half the local businesses and for us, all in the same tight handwriting. Then there were 2 daughters. In Christmas photos, we looked perfect. Matching pajamas, forced smiles, Dad's arm slung around all 3 of his girls. But if you'd lived inside that house, you'd know there was a ranking system. Unofficial, sure, but as permanent as if it had been taped to the fridge in red ink with gold stars next to one name and none next to the other. Sienna was the star, always had been. She was 2 years and 3 months younger than me and somehow managed to land exactly where our parents' pride converged. She was effortlessly pretty in that clean, glossy way that doesn't require filters. Her words always seemed to land right side up. Teachers adored her, neighbors cooed over her, relatives asked about her first at every holiday dinner. If attention was light, Sienna was the sun. The rest of us were just orbiting. Me, I was the test run. The kid they had before they figured out how to do it right. I learned my place early. 7, maybe 8 years old, sitting on a cold metal folding chair at the corner of the dinner table. The regular chairs were for real family members and guests. The rickety folding one, the one that pinched your thighs if you shifted your weight wrong, that was mine. It was never said out loud. No one had to. When Sienna turned 16, our parents threw a party that might as well have been a community event. Dad grilled burgers for what felt like the entire neighborhood. Mom ordered a cake with her name in flawless pink icing. And the car. They rolled a used Honda Civic into the driveway with a big red bow on the hood. Nothing luxury, but clean, low mileage, reliable. Everyone clapped like she'd won the lottery. Photos snapped. Sienna posed with the keys, laughter bubbling out of her as if life would always hand her things with ribbons attached. I remember standing in the backyard, hands shoved in my hoodie pockets, watching the whole spectacle from just outside the circle of light cast by the tiki torches. This is what love looks like in this house, I thought. Loud, public, performative. When I turned 16, my birthday fell on a Tuesday. No party, no burgers, definitely no car. Mom handed me a bookstore gift card for exactly $25 while rinsing plates in the sink. "You love reading, right?" she said, like she was checking a box. "Thought this would be perfect for you." She wasn't wrong. Books had been my escape hatch for years. But even as I turned the plastic card over in my hand, something hollow settled in my chest. I didn't want a car, not really. What I wanted was proof I existed in their heads the way Sienna did. That they saw me, not just as the older daughter who could babysit or fill in or understand when things weren't fair, but as someone whose milestones mattered. The differences seeped into everything. Sienna got new clothes every fall. I wore hand-me-downs from cousins and clearance racks. Her room got redecorated twice in high school. Mine kept the faded wallpaper from when I was 6, tiny yellow ducks marching in rows over my head, while I stared at the ceiling and imagined a life where my name meant something. When Sienna made the debate team, our parents drove 2 hours to tournaments and collected her ribbons in a shadow box. When I placed third in state for academic decathlon, Dad grunted, "That's nice," without looking up from his newspaper. I adapted. At 14, I got my first job at the hardware store, stocking shelves for cash. By junior year, I was working 20 hours a week between that and tutoring kids in math. Every dollar went into a locked metal box under my bed. I had a plan. Get into a good college. Study something practical, engineering, operations, whatever would turn my obsession with systems into a paycheck. Build a future where no one could tell me I didn't deserve one. I found a program at Indiana State that made sense. Strong in engineering, solid in anything logistics adjacent. I researched tuition, financial aid, work-study programs. I built spreadsheets. I calculated and recalculated. When the acceptance letter came that March, I opened it in the driveway, fingers shaking, jacket unzipped despite the cold. "Congratulations," it said in bold letters. For one reckless, hopeful second, I pictured my parents' faces lighting up. I imagined hugs, maybe even that rare spark of pride directed at me instead of around me. I walked into the kitchen, letter in hand. Dad was at the table with his newspaper. Mom was sorting bills into neat stacks. "I got into Indiana State," I announced. "They gave me a partial scholarship. It covers 60%. I can get the rest with work study if you'll just—" Dad didn't look up. "We can't pay for 2 tuitions, Aria." Just like that. Flat. Final. Mom didn't turn around. "Sienna's pre-law program is expensive. You'll have to be realistic." "I've worked for this," I said, my voice thinning, stretching. "I can cover most of it. I just need—" "Then cover all of it," Dad cut in. "You're 18. Time to be independent." From the couch, Sienna glanced up from her phone, barely interested. "People go to community college, Aria. It's not that deep." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just crack. "You've never even asked what I want," I whispered. The room went very still. Mom pulled a $20 bill out of her wallet and pressed it into my palm like she was stamping a form. "Be independent then," she said. Dad folded his newspaper, looked me dead in the eye, for the first time that day. "Your sister has real potential," he said. "We're investing in what makes sense." There it was, the hierarchy, spoken out loud at last. Sienna deserved their money, their effort, their future. I deserved whatever I could scrape together on my own. 5 years later, that same sister was about to walk into my office, my company, looking for a job. And she had absolutely no idea who'd be sitting across from her. I didn't explode. There was no screaming match, no thrown dishes, no dramatic storming out like in movies. I just stood there in the kitchen, that limp $20 bill sweating in my palm, and realized that something I'd been pretending was temporary had actually been permanent for years. I was never going to be the one they chose. That night I packed quietly. One suitcase with clothes I could layer if it got cold. A stack of notebooks. A few paperbacks I couldn't imagine leaving behind. My acceptance letter, folded and tucked into the inside pocket of my jacket, like a relic from an alternate timeline where my parents said, "We'll figure it out. We're proud of you." I left my phone on my desk. They paid for it, and I didn't need a tracking device in my pocket tying me back to a house that had just downgraded me from inconvenient daughter to financial deadweight. My locked metal cash box sat at the back of my closet. I opened it one last time and counted. 3 years of weekend shifts and after-school tutoring. 3 years of choosing store-brand cereal over anything with a mascot. Total 3 and 47. Not enough to build a life. Barely enough to survive a month. But it was mine. All of it. Around 9 p.m., when the house went quiet and the glow under my parents' bedroom door clicked off, I picked up my suitcase. Each step down the stairs creaked louder than I remembered, like the house was tattling on me one last time. I moved through the kitchen, past the fridge where our childhood drawings used to hang before Sienna's awards took their place. Debate ribbons, honor roll certificates, photos of her holding up trophies. The hierarchy laminated. At the back door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob. For a second, I imagined Mom calling out, "Aria, wait, let's talk about this." She didn't. I opened the door. Rain had started sometime after sunset, a heavy spring downpour that blurred the streetlights and turned the driveway into slick black glass. The air smelled like wet pavement and the faint tang of motor oil from Dad's truck. As I stepped out, suitcase wheels bumping over the doorframe, something made me glance back toward the living room window. Sienna stood there. Inside, the house glowed warm and golden around her. The same house I'd eaten in, slept in, studied in. The same house where my future had just been reduced to a $20 bill and a lecture about being realistic. We locked eyes through the glass. She didn't wave, didn't open the door, didn't even look shocked. She just watched me go, the way you watch a neighbor's guest leave after an awkward dinner. Polite, distant, almost relieved. I waited for her to do something. Press her palm to the glass. Mouth don't go. Call our parents. Nothing. The door closed behind me with a soft click, as final as a signature on a contract. It was the last time I stood on that porch as someone who lived there. The rain soaked through my hoodie in seconds. My suitcase wheels snagged in a crack in the driveway, spraying dirty water up my shins. I forced them loose and kept walking, the acceptance letter crinkling damply against my chest. I didn't go far. I didn't have anywhere to go. About 6 blocks away, there was a bus stop, one of those metal benches with gaps cut into the slats so no one could lie down on it properly. An architectural middle finger to anyone desperate enough to try. It didn't stop me. I sat, then lay down anyway, curling around my suitcase, feeling the cold leach into my spine. Cars hissed past through puddles, spraying my shoes. The streetlights buzzed overhead, turning raindrops into tiny falling sparks. I kept pulling out the acceptance letter, even though the ink was starting to blur at the edges where the paper had gotten wet. "Congratulations," it said. I read that word over and over, as if repetition could turn it into shelter. By the second night, the metal bench felt welded to my bones. My suitcase might as well have weighed 1,000 pounds. Every time I shifted it, my arms shook. The cough started as a tickle. By midnight, it was a full-body event. Each breath felt like it scraped my throat raw. My chest burned. I tried to breathe shallowly to avoid triggering it, but my body didn't care about my strategies. By the third night, everything blurred. My skin burned hot and clammy at the same time. The air felt thick, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. The streetlights above me turned into fuzzy halos, then into starbursts. Reality went soft at the edges. I remember thinking, not even dramatically, just matter-of-factly, "Oh, so this is how it happens. You get sick, and there's nowhere to go, and then you just stop." A voice cut through the fog like someone had opened a window. "Hey there, you okay?" I tried to focus, but the world kept sliding sideways. A shape knelt down in front of me. Male, maybe mid-50s, gray hair peeking out from under a cap. Jacket worn at the elbows. Work boots splattered with old mud. He smelled like diesel and rain. "I'm fine," I tried to say, but what came out sounded like a croak wrapped in a cough. He frowned. Yeah, that's not fine. He shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders without asking my name, without asking what I'd done wrong to end up here. The warmth felt like an accusation. I was supposed to be stronger than this, smarter than this. I was the girl with the spreadsheets and the plans, and there I was, shivering on a metal bench, barely able to hold my own acceptance letter steady. You got anyone I can call? He asked. Images flashed. My mom's back turned at the sink, my dad's eyes flat over the edge of his newspaper, Sienna behind glass. No, I whispered. He didn't argue, didn't press. Okay, he said simply, like it was just another piece of data. Then I'll call. He dialed 911. I remember bright lights, hands on my shoulders, someone asking questions I couldn't answer without coughing so hard my ribs felt like they might crack. Name, age. Do you know where you are? The world fractured into flashes. The inside of an ambulance. Oxygen mask, plastic against my face. My fingers clutching the damp corner of the acceptance letter, like it was the only tether I had left. The hospital lights were brutal, white and humming and unforgiving. A nurse with tired eyes slid a wristband onto my arm, the plastic cool against hot skin. Name, Aria Lawson. Age, 18. Address. I stared at her, brain lurching. I couldn't say my parents' street, not after they'd just told me I didn't belong there in the future, not when every cell in my body understood that if I went back, nothing would change except the level of resentment in the air. I don't have one, I managed. The nurse paused, pen hovering. Then she wrote something down, the scratch of the ballpoint loud in my ears. Later, when the fever eased just enough for my vision to sharpen, I glanced at the band. Under address, one word in all caps, unknown. It shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. It was technically accurate. But seeing it there, so official, so clinical, felt like a verdict. Not just homeless, not just unwanted. Unmapped. Like I'd been erased from the world's filing system and dropped into the miscellaneous bin of people nobody had time to categorize. They kept me for 2 days. Antibiotics, IV fluids, chest x-rays. I drifted in and out, surfacing to the beep of monitors and the low murmur of nurses at their station. On the second morning, when my fever finally broke enough that my thoughts started lining up again, I noticed it. A styrofoam cup of orange juice on the tray beside my bed, and underneath it, a folded $10 bill. The man who brought you in left that, a younger nurse explained when she saw me staring. Said you'd need it more than he does. Left a note, too. The note was written on the back of a gas station receipt. Blocky handwriting, no flourishes. You're tougher than you think you are. Use this to get somewhere warm. Thomas Wright. That was it. No lecture, no pity. Just a stranger's belief in a version of me I couldn't see yet. I never saw Thomas again. But I kept that scrap of paper like it was a blueprint for a life I hadn't drawn yet. When they discharged me, the social worker handed me a flimsy pamphlet with a photo of a smiling woman on the front and the words Haven House Women's Shelter across the top. There's a bed free there, she said, sounding both rushed and kind. They'll give you a place to stay for a bit, help you get on your feet. A place. Not a home, but not a bus stop bench either. I walked out of the hospital with a plastic pharmacy bag of antibiotics, a damp acceptance letter, $10 from a stranger, and a wristband that called me unknown. I had no idea that Haven House would be where the next version of me started to form. The walk to Haven House took almost 40 minutes. My body wasn't ready for it. Every step sent a thin tremor of exhaustion through my legs, like the fever hadn't quite let go of me yet. The plastic hospital bag banged against my hip with each stride, the antibiotic bottle rattling inside like a reminder that I wasn't completely out of danger. The sky had dried to a dull gray, but puddles still lined the sidewalks, and the cold stuck to my skin like wet paper. By the time I reached the block the social worker had pointed me toward, my lungs felt tight again, and I had to slow down, leaning a hand against a brick wall to catch my breath. Haven House sat between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The building looked tired. Peeling paint, rust along the window frames, a flickering sign above the door that buzzed like it didn't want to keep working but hadn't given up yet. But inside was warmth, actual warmth. The air smelled faintly of detergent, chili simmering somewhere in the building, and the unmistakable mix of too many people trying to build a life in too little space. A woman at the front desk looked up when I stepped in, suitcase dragging behind me like a reluctant dog. Name? She asked. Aria Lawson. New? I nodded. She didn't stare the way some people do when they clock homeless youth. She didn't scan me for obvious flaws or suspicious edges. She just pressed a worn-out button on an intercom. Margaret, new intake. A few minutes later, a woman in her 60s walked out from a hallway, gray hair pulled into a bun that meant business, eyes that had seen every kind of story, painful ones, complicated ones, brave ones, and knew the difference between a victim and someone trying to survive. "Come with me," she said. Her voice was firm, not unkind. I followed her into a small office where she handed me a clipboard and a pen. Basic questions: name, age, medical issues, emergency contacts. The last one sat blank. When she looked at the form, she didn't comment. She simply nodded and stood. "Let me show you your room." Room was generous. It was more like a narrow box with 2 bunk beds, a drawer unit with mismatched handles, and a window thick with grime. But there were clean sheets, and a lockbox for my belongings, and 4 walls that didn't rattle in the wind like the bus stop shelter. "You get 1 bed, 1 cabinet, 1 chance," Margaret said. "You respect the rules, you respect the other women, and you do your chores. Do that, and you'll be fine here." My voice came out small. "Okay." She softened, barely, but enough. "Dinner's at 6. Chore assignments are on the board. Don't worry, none of them are glamorous." That almost made me laugh. Almost. After she left, I sat on the lower bunk and let my suitcase fall open. The few belongings inside looked even sadder in the fluorescent light, like the props of a life that had never really started. But it was a life, mine, and I wasn't sleeping outside tonight. The routine began. At 6 p.m., I ate chili that tasted like someone had tried very hard with very cheap ingredients. But it was warm, and I finished every spoonful. After dinner, I found my assigned chore, laundry room. I folded sheets while industrial dryers roared like engines beside me. It wasn't glamorous, but it grounded me. Hands in motion, mind distracted. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was floating away from myself. The other women mostly kept to their own corners, reading, fixing hair, writing resumes, holding quiet conversations over instant coffee. I wasn't ready to join them, so I didn't. They didn't push. They called me the quiet one within a week, not unkindly, more like a classification, the same way they labeled who snored loudly or who burned everything in the communal toaster. But they didn't treat me like a ghost. That was new. Every morning began with work, scrubbing bathrooms until my hands were raw from the bleach, mopping hallways with industrial cleaner that smelled like biting mint, helping Margaret reorganize the donation closet, which was a Tetris game of sweaters, shoes, and bags nobody wanted but that we desperately needed. Work felt like proof. Proof I existed, proof I contributed, proof I wasn't just taking up space. I lived in that rhythm. Chores, library books, chili, laundry room, small talk, sleep. It wasn't a future, but it was stability. 2 weeks in, everything shifted. Margaret walked into the common area holding a sheet of paper thumbtacked to a corkboard. "Job postings," she announced. "Ladies, new listings are up." Everyone stirred. Jobs meant hope, even if they were minimum wage and temporary. I approached the board slowly, scanning restaurant names, retail gigs, cleaning services. Then one ad caught my eye. Not typed, not printed. Handwritten, black marker pressed too hard against the paper. Help wanted. Santos Diner. 5th and Pine, apply in person. No fancy logo, no email, no promises. Just 3 lines. But something about it tugged at me. A diner was predictable. Chaotic, yes, but chaos had patterns. Patterns had systems. Systems meant I could work my way up if I learned them. "Take it," Margaret said behind me. "You've been circling the board every day. If it speaks to you, go." I swallowed. "Do I look ready?" She looked me up and down, at the secondhand jeans, the borrowed shirt, the scuffed sneakers. "You look like someone who'll show up," she said. "That's more than most places get." She was right. The next morning, I stood in front of the donation closet, picking the cleanest, least oversized button-up shirt I could find. The sleeves were a little too long, the pants a little too short, and the shoes rubbed the backs of my heels raw. But I walked the 18 blocks to 5th and Pine anyway. By block 3, I regretted it. By block 10, I couldn't feel my toes. By block 18, I promised myself that if I didn't get the job, I'd sit on the curb and cry until my organs shut down. Santos Diner appears at the corner, a chipped red door, a neon sign buzzing faintly, the smell of fried eggs and burnt toast drifting out like an invitation and a warning. Inside, a woman in her 50s with graying hair tied into a low ponytail stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, no nonsense in her posture. This had to be Carmen Santos. She looked me over once, not in a judging way, more like she was assessing whether I'd survive her kitchen during the lunch rush. "You hear about the sign?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "You ever wait tables?" "No, ma'am." "You learn fast?" "Yes, ma'am." "You planning to quit in 2 days when you realize customers are demons wearing khakis?" "No, ma'am." Something flickered in her eyes, almost amusement. She reached under the counter and tossed me an apron. "Start with the syrup bottles. They're sticky and it pisses people off. Don't break anything. If you can last a week without crying or walking out mid-shift, I'll put you on the schedule." And just like that, I had my first job, my first chance, my first foothold since I walked away from home with nothing but a damp acceptance letter and a suitcase that smelled like rain. That night, as I wiped down tables and watched Carmen organize orders like a battlefield commander, I felt something small and unfamiliar flicker in my chest. Hope. Not the explosive cinematic kind, the quieter kind. The kind that sounds like a diner doorbell chiming, like plates clattering, like Carmen barking, "You missed a spot behind the napkin dispenser, kid." The kind that whispers, "Survive this, and maybe you can build something." Little did I know, I wasn't just building something. I was rebuilding myself. If you've never worked in a diner, let me explain something honestly. Restaurants aren't run on food. They're run on pressure, caffeine, and pure, stubborn will. Santos Diner was no different. I started the next morning at 6 a.m., half asleep and still sore from walking 18 blocks the day before. Carmen tossed me an apron that smelled permanently like coffee grounds and bacon grease. "Rule number 1, she said, not looking up from the grill. "Don't ask customers how their day is. They'll tell you, and it'll ruin yours." I nodded like she'd handed me sacred scripture. I learned quickly that diners have their own ecosystem. The construction crew came in at 5:30 a.m., sharp. Large men with paint-stained boots, ordering the same thing every morning. The nurses from St. Catherine's showed up after night shifts, eyes glazed, desperate for coffee more than oxygen. The lunch crowd clogged the booths at exactly 12:03, every weekday, like they'd rehearsed it. And then the drifters, the people who lived on the margins, came in between 3 and 5 p.m., ordering a single cup of coffee they stretched for hours. Carmen didn't judge them. She didn't judge anyone. She just wanted the place to run right. By day 3, I realized something important. Chaos has patterns, and patterns have systems. And systems I could handle. While other servers panicked, whenever orders stacked or customers complained, something in my brain lit up. The diner was wild, loud, unpredictable, but underneath that noise was rhythm, flow, predictability. I didn't know it yet, but I was already thinking like a logistics manager. Then came Jake Morrison. The delivery truck backed into the alley behind the diner with a groan of old brakes. Carmen called out, "Delivery's late again," and stomped toward the back. I followed. The driver jumped down from the cab. Mid-30s, brown hair escaping under his cap, shirt slightly untucked like he'd lost a fight with his morning. "Sorry," he called. "Warehouse loaded my truck wrong. Again. Had to double back." He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Eggs and dairy go inside first," Carmen snapped. "You keep making me reorganize mid-shift. I'm switching suppliers." He sighed. I know. They're training new guys, and..." He paused when he noticed me. Or more accurately, when he noticed I was already pulling the crates toward the kitchen door by category. "Cold storage first," I said. "Dry goods in the back?" His eyebrows lifted. "Exactly." I shrugged. "Makes sense. Faster that way." He leaned against the truck, crossing his arms. "You ever thought about logistics?" I blinked. "What?" "Logistics. Routing, supply chains, inventory flow, moving the right stuff to the right place at the right time." I shook my head. "No." But the word hung in my brain like a string waiting to be pulled. He grinned. "Well, you've got the instincts. Most people don't see the patterns. You do." It was a casual comment. He probably forgot he said it 5 minutes later. I didn't. That night, when my shift ended, I walked straight to the public library with my tips, 8 crumpled dollars and a handful of quarters, and borrowed whatever books I could carry. Introduction to Supply Chain Management, Inventory Systems and Flow Patterns, Distribution Networks 101, Operations Research. I sat at a long wooden table as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead and opened the first one. The concepts clicked, not easily, not instantly, but undeniably. Demand forecasting? That was just predicting which customers would show up first at the diner. Inventory turnover? We talked about that every time Carmen complained about syrup running low. Route optimization. That was the map I created in my head every day while walking to work. The fastest paths, the streets with fewer broken sidewalks, the blocks with shade in the summer. It all made sense, like I was finally learning the language I'd been unconsciously speaking for years. Carmen noticed. She wasn't a woman who wasted words. One afternoon, between rushes, she walked by the booth where I was highlighting a chapter about distribution bottlenecks. "What's all that?" she asked. "Logistics," I said, "taking a course, kind of." She stared for a beat, then nodded. "This place runs on logistics," she said. "Good ones when I'm paying attention, bad ones when I'm not." That was her way of saying, keep going. Weeks passed, and the diner became my classroom. I reorganized the dry storage shelves so oldest products got used first. I noticed which days deliveries ran late and why. I tracked how long each rush lasted. I predicted patterns before they happened. One morning at 5:30 a.m., Carmen watched me refill the salt shakers in a new, faster order and said, "You're wasted on this job, kid." She said it like a complaint, but it felt like the first compliment anyone had given me in years. Then Jake came back. He showed up 2 weeks later with dark circles under his eyes and a clipboard of invoices. "You got a minute?" he asked as he stamped a delivery form. I wiped my hands on my apron. "Sure." He slid a piece of paper across the counter, a job listing. Logistics Coordinator, Morrison Freight Solutions Entry Level. Data entry, routing assistance, must be detail-oriented. "It's not glamorous," he said. "Mostly paper pushing, occasionally dealing with cranky drivers. But it's a foot in the door, and you've got the brain for it." My chest tightened, not with fear, with possibility. Like a door that had always been locked suddenly had a keyhole. That night, after my shift, I filled out the online application at the library's ancient computer. My resume was laughably thin. Santos Diner, server, high school diploma. No references besides Carmen. Self-study in logistics that wasn't even formal. I nearly didn't send it, but then I remembered the hospital wristband labeled unknown, and the $20 bill, and the rain. And I hit submit. 2 weeks later, they called. The interview was in a warehouse district in a building that hummed with work. Forklifts, beeping trucks, clipboards, and shouting. The operations manager, a woman named Patricia Hayes, looked at my resume with one eyebrow raised. "You've got no formal training in logistics." "No, ma'am," I said, "but I understand systems. If you give me a chance, I can show you." She didn't laugh, didn't scoff. She handed me a clipboard with last month's delivery schedules. "Tell me what's wrong with this." I scanned it. 30 seconds, 60, 90. Then I looked up. "You've got 2 routes overlapping and wasting fuel. One driver's schedule has him stuck in afternoon traffic every day, so his deliveries are late, and your loading sequence forces drivers to reshuffle pallets mid-shift." Patricia stared at me, not with disbelief, but with calculation. "When can you start?" she asked. I thought I'd misheard her. But no, she meant it. That job didn't just save me. It became the foundation of the empire I would build years later. But at the time it felt simple, modest, hopeful. A spark. A spark that, when fanned, would one day become Northline Logistics. And that spark began here, in a diner that smelled like burnt toast, and the hands of a girl determined to rebuild herself from broken pieces and borrowed shirts. If Santos Diner taught me the rhythm of chaos, Morrison Freight Solutions taught me the architecture beneath it. It wasn't glamorous, not even close. The office was in a warehouse district that smelled perpetually like diesel and cardboard. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the same irritated energy as Patricia Hayes, my new boss. But on my first day, stepping into that building felt like stepping into possibility, real possibility. Not the kind of imagined potential my parents never bothered seeing in me, but something earned. The lowest rung. My first month was data entry, literal stacks of invoices, dates, routes, driver logs. All of it had to be typed into system software that froze every hour like it needed emotional support. My desk chair squeaked loudly enough to attract stares, and the AC vent above me dripped condensation on my keyboard. But I didn't complain. Complaints implied expectation. I expected nothing, which meant every small opportunity felt like a gift. Patricia noticed that. She noticed everything. On my 3rd week, she handed me a route late report. "Sort this," she said, "by reason." There were 48 entries. The typical person would have simply grouped them. Traffic, mechanical issues, incorrect addresses. I went further. I color-coded by time of day patterns, mapped which drivers were consistently late, flagged which clients always submitted incorrect delivery windows, then attached a one-page summary with 3 proposed routing changes. Patricia read it in silence, then set it down slowly. "You did all that?" "Yes, ma'am." She tapped the page with a pen. "Keep going." Those were the 2 words that changed my entire trajectory. A system built on people. People think logistics is numbers and trucks. It's not. It's trust. Drivers trust you not to give them impossible routes. Clients trust you not to make excuses. Vendors trust you to pay invoices on time. I learned that quickly, and I learned how to talk to people in a way that kept everything moving smoothly. If a driver was late, let's adjust your route to avoid the bottleneck on Highway 9. If a client was angry, I'm on it. Here are 3 solutions. If a vendor was slow, let's renegotiate so we both win. Within 6 months, I'd saved the company 12% in fuel costs just by reworking our routing map with free optimization software I found in a logistics forum. Patricia's eyebrow twitched when she saw the numbers, the Patricia equivalent of applause. After that, she looped me into bigger projects: vendor contract reviews, warehouse reorganization, holiday surge planning. I stayed late, came early, ate sad desk lunches, and checked the tracking system on my phone during bus rides back to Haven House. A new kind of mentor. As I grew in the role, Jake, the delivery driver who'd first pushed me toward logistics, became a consistent presence. He'd stop by the office for coffee on his break. Sometimes he'd lean on my desk and explain route negotiation tactics. Sometimes I'd show him my latest optimization diagram like a kid showing off a drawing. One afternoon he said, "You see the entire board, Arya. Most people only see their own square." That meant more than he knew, because my family had never seen me at all. Certifications, ramen, and a future. I enrolled in logistics certifications I could barely afford, put some on payment plans, ate ramen for weeks, studied until my eyes burned. I kept every certificate in a cheap plastic binder under my bed at the shelter. Each one felt like a brick in a foundation. The promotion. At the 18-month mark, Patricia called me into her office. She rarely smiled, but she wasn't scowling either. "I'm retiring next year," she said. "Corporate asked my opinion about internal promotions." I held my breath. "I told them they'd be stupid not to consider you." 3 weeks later, I became operations manager, a salary that didn't feel real at first. Enough to move into a tiny studio apartment, enough to buy new clothes that actually fit, enough to believe I might have a future outside survival mode. The glass ceiling moment. But as months passed, I realized something important. Working for a company means your ceiling is built by someone else. Even good bosses, even ones like Patricia, can't change the structure you're trapped inside. I wanted more than a ceiling, I wanted sky. The beginning of North Lane Logistics. So one Saturday morning, in my studio apartment where the heater rattled like it was dying, I opened my laptop and started writing a business plan. Target market. Time-sensitive medical deliveries, lab samples, equipment that couldn't afford delays, contracts big players avoided because they were too risky. I applied for a small business loan. Miraculously, it was approved. Maybe because I'd spent 2 years proving myself to vendors who vouched for me. Maybe because someone at the bank saw something I didn't. I put in every dollar I'd saved, $8,000. That money could have bought me comfort. Instead, it bought me freedom. The double life phase. For 6 brutal months, I worked full-time at Morrison Freight, ran my fledgling business at night, answered client calls at 2 a.m., learned QuickBooks in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks, coordinated deliveries while eating convenience store sandwiches. Patricia knew. Of course she knew. One afternoon, she pulled me aside. "I won't tell corporate," she said, "but when you're ready to jump, do it clean. Don't straddle 2 ladders." Her blessing was the closest thing to permission I needed. The contract that changed everything. 4 months later, Northline landed a small contract with a regional hospital network to transport lab samples. High risk, high stakes, 0 room for error. For 3 months. Not one late delivery. Not one compromised sample. Not one complaint. They doubled the contract. My decision was made. I resigned from Morrison Freight. Patricia threw me a going-away party with sheet cake and off-brand soda. "You're going to do great things," she said. "Hire me someday." Ethan enters the picture. Northline grew fast. Too fast for the slapdash spreadsheets I'd been using. So I hired a part-time IT consultant to set up a real routing system. His name was Ethan Rivera. He wore clean button-downs, had a calm voice, and treated every problem like a puzzle instead of a disaster. He didn't stare at my mismatched furniture or the fact that my office was still half apartment. He just asked, "What kind of future do you want this company to have?" No one had ever asked me that before. He would become the first person I trusted after years of living on caution, the first person who would understand my ambition without flinching, the first person who would see me as more than potential, but as a person worth investing in. I didn't know it then, but Ethan would become part of the family I chose, the one I built, the one that would stand solid when the old one came knocking again. Northline didn't explode overnight. It grew like a stubborn weed, pushing through cracks, inch by inch, refusing to die. And I learned something about myself in the process. I didn't need permission to take up space. Not anymore. The rise of Northline. Within a year of going full-time, I hired my first 2 employees, warehouse workers who were smarter than anyone had ever bothered to notice. We operated out of a cramped industrial unit where the heaters rattled, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the loading dock flooded every time it rained. But it was ours. Clients liked our accuracy, liked that I answered calls at 11 p.m., liked that we never said, "We can't." By year 2, we handled contracts for a pharmaceutical distributor, a regional grocery chain, 3 manufacturing companies. By year 3, we were doing 7 figures in annual revenue. My apartment office became a real office, then a bigger one, then one with an actual warehouse attached. Every step forward felt surreal, like I was stepping into a life someone else had abandoned and I'd picked up off the ground. The wall of reminders. In my new office, a glass-walled corner on the top floor of a modest downtown building, I hung 3 frames. The hospital wristband marked unknown, the faded $20 bill my mother shoved into my hand. Northline's first major contract, not as trophies, as origins. Proof of what I built from the rubble. Proof of what I survived. Ethan. My calm in the chaos. By the time we moved into the new office, Ethan and I had been dating quietly for almost a year. He wasn't showy. He didn't crowd me. He didn't try to fix me when I got quiet. He just stayed through. Late-night panic over payroll, client calls that came during dinner, my habit of triple-checking locks before bed, the way I kept the $20 bill framed like a relic. He asked questions gently, held space gently, loved gently. And that was its own form of miracle. Sometimes he'd show up at my office with a coffee, lean against the doorway, and watch me work with that soft half smile he reserved only for me. "Aria," he'd say, whenever I got too wound up, "you've already done the hardest part. Everything now is just building." I tried to believe him. Then came the contract. In year 5, just 3 weeks before everything unraveled, Northline signed a massive 3-year deal to handle medical supply distribution for a multi-hospital network. The same hospital group that had once treated me when I arrived wheezing and feverish, a teenager with no address. Life is strange that way, circular, symmetrical. I didn't celebrate, not loudly. But that night, I sat with Ethan on our couch and let myself feel proud. Not because of the money, because I had finally reached a place no one could take away from me. Or so I thought. Monday morning, the folder. 3 weeks after the deal was signed, my office manager, Nina, walked into my office holding a resume. She had this look, like she'd stumbled upon a glitch in the universe. "Got an application for the coordinator position," she said. "Strong background, 3 years in PR, some logistics experience. Good references." She placed the folder on my desk. "Thought you might want to see this one yourself." I opened it. Read the header. And the world narrowed to a single line of text. Sienna Lawson, Springfield, IN. My sister. My parents' miracle child. The girl who watched me walk into the rain without lifting a finger. Every small sound in the office faded. The hum of HVAC, the clatter of keyboards, the ding of incoming emails. All of it dulled under the roar of memory. Nina was watching me carefully. "Do you want me to skip this candidate?" I swallowed. My mouth tasted like metal. "Schedule her for Tuesday at 9. "You sure?" "Yes." My voice didn't waver, but my hands did, just slightly, when I closed the folder. A night of ghosts. That night, Ethan cooked. I didn't eat. I just stared at the resume sitting on the coffee table. "Aria," he finally asked, "you're somewhere else tonight." I thought about telling him everything. The favoritism, the folding chair at the dinner table, the $20 bill, the window with Sienna watching me leave. But the words lodged in my throat. Some wounds feel too old to reopen. "I have an interview Tuesday," I said instead. "Anyone important?" I kept my eyes on the resume. Yes. He didn't push. He just reached for my hand and held it until the tension eased from my shoulders. The night before, Monday night, I couldn't sleep. Rain pattered against the windows, soft and relentless. The city lights blurred behind the streaks like smeared gold paint. I stood in my office alone, staring out at the skyline. If someone had told 18-year-old me, soaking wet, feverish, homeless, that one day my sister would be walking into my office asking me for a job, I don't think she would have believed it. Life isn't poetic, not usually, but this was symmetry so sharp it almost felt cruel. When Tuesday morning arrived, the air felt different, heavier, charged. At 8:59 a.m., Nina knocked and said, "She's here." I smoothed my blazer, straightened the frames on my wall, my past laid out like evidence. Then I said, "Send her in." The click of heels on polished floor, a familiar gait I'd forgotten I still remembered. The door opened, and there she was, older, sharper, unmistakably Sienna. She didn't recognize me, not yet. But she would, and soon everything we'd buried would claw its way to the surface. Sienna stepped into my office like she belonged in rooms like this. Chin up, perfect posture, a portfolio tucked under one arm, matching her shoes exactly. Her hair was styled the same way Mom used to do it before debate tournaments. Sleek, polished, not a strand out of place. She smiled politely, professionally, the way you smile at strangers who hold your future in their hands. "Good morning," she said. "Thank you for meeting with me." Her voice hadn't changed, still clear, still smooth in that effortless way that made teachers adore her. I gestured toward the chair. "Have a seat." She sat without hesitation, crossing her legs, adjusting her blazer, ready to present herself as the ideal candidate. Across the room, Nina lingered by the door with her clipboard. Completely unaware, she was watching two sisters sit down for a reckoning 5 years overdue. "Ms. Lawson," she began, "this is Aria Lawson, founder and CEO of Northline Logistics." Sienna's face shifted in micromotions. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, shock. Her breath hitched, barely audible, but I heard it anyway. "Aria," she whispered. I kept my voice level, professional, untouched by the memory of standing in the rain outside our house with a suitcase that weighed more than my parents' affection. "Let's begin," I said. "The performance." For the next 10 minutes, Sienna launched into her rehearsed pitch, her education, her PR background, her experience coordinating between departments. Her words were polished, smooth, memorized, but her eyes kept drifting to the wall behind me, to the 3 frames, the hospital wristband labeled unknown, the faded $20 bill, Northline's first major contract. Her gaze stuck on the $20 bill like it had grown teeth. I watched the realization bloom across her face. This is who you left. This is who you didn't stop. This is who you watched walk into the rain. She didn't say it. She didn't need to. The first question. When she finished speaking, hands shaky now, I folded my hands on the desk. "Tell me about a time you handled conflict," I said. She blinked, thrown off. "Well, at my last company, there was a dispute about resource allocation. I had to make difficult decisions about who got access to what. And what guided that decision?" She swallowed. I tried to be fair. I leaned forward slightly. "Fairness. That's an interesting concept. What does fairness mean to you, Ms. Lawson?" Her throat tightened. She knew exactly what I was asking. Not professionally, not technically. Personally. "Fairness," she said quietly, "means everyone gets an equal chance, based on merit." "Everyone?" I repeated. She flinched. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her composure cracked like thin ice under weight. "Aria, we're here to discuss your qualifications," I said. "This is a professional setting. Let's keep it professional." Her eyes shined, but she blinked the tears back, just like she had blinked away responsibility 5 years ago. The first real words between us. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." She winced. Pain flickered across her face, raw and unguarded. "Mom and Dad said you left. They said you wanted to start your own life. They said—" "I know what they said." She looked at the $20 bill on the wall again. Her voice broke. "I watched you leave," she admitted. "I saw you walk out the back door with your suitcase. I just watched." "Yes, I should have stopped you. Yes, I was a coward." She said it so softly it barely existed. The question that mattered. After a long, suffocating silence, she asked the thing she came to ask, but not the way she planned to ask it. "Are you going to hire me?" It wasn't entitled. It wasn't confident. It was terrified. Like she was bracing for the punishment she once helped deliver by doing nothing. I picked up her resume. Objectively, she was qualified. She had a skill set we genuinely needed. If she'd been any other candidate, I'd have hired her on the spot. But she wasn't any other candidate. She was a living embodiment of a hierarchy that nearly killed me. So I asked her one thing. Can you work for someone your parents decided wasn't worth investing in? She sucked in a breath. Can you take direction from the sister they threw away? Her face collapsed. Emotion crashed through her posture like a wave. Humility, regret, fear, and, for the first time in our lives, respect. I can try, she whispered. The decision. I closed her resume. Set it down between us. You start Monday. Her head snapped up. You're hiring me? Yes. Why? Because everyone deserves a fair chance, even the people who never gave you one. She cried then, silent tears sliding down her face. Not manipulative, not entitled, just human. When you come to work, I said, you'll report to Nina. You'll train under her. You will be held to the same standards as every other employee. No more, no less. She nodded quickly. I can do that. This isn't about family, I added. This is about work. I understand. I hope you do. After she left, when she stepped out of my office, her shoulders were hunched, not in shame, but in a way that looked like she had finally put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. Nina came in a moment later, eyebrows raised. So, we're hiring her? Yes. You sure? I glanced at the wall, at the $20 bill, at the wristband, at the contract. Yes, I said, but this time I'm in control of the story. That night, back home, Ethan watched me carefully as I changed into sweatpants and sat beside him on the couch. He brushed a thumb along my cheek. You look like you survived something. I did, I said simply, and I rested my head on his shoulder, letting myself breathe evenly for the first time all day. Because I knew the storm wasn't over. My parents wouldn't stay silent. Sienna wouldn't stay quiet. The past never stays buried when the present shines brighter than anything it ever offered. But for the first time, I felt ready. For confrontation, for truth, for boundaries. My sister had walked into my office asking for a chance. I gave her one. Now I had to see whether she deserved it. Stop. Part 8. Boundaries. Not fairy tale reunions. Sienna started the following Monday. She arrived early, earlier than I'd ever seen her show up for anything growing up. Black slacks, simple blouse, hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup. Not the polished golden child from our old life. Someone new, someone trying. Nina gave her a tour, ran through procedures, showed her how we logged client requests. I watched from my glass office, unseen. Not out of distrust, but because I needed to see for myself whether this was an act or an actual shift in who she was becoming. And slowly, painfully, I realized something. She was trying, really trying. She asked good questions, took notes, didn't assume she knew everything, didn't act like being a Lawson gave her shortcuts. She earned things the way I had always needed to, step by step, task by task. For the first time in our lives, we were on equal ground. My parents make their move. It didn't take long after Sienna's first day. 3 days, to be exact. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing a budget projection. Mom, Sienna told us she saw you. We're glad you're doing well. We'd like to talk. I stared at the screen. The words felt surgical, carefully chosen, emotionally distant. Not, we're sorry. Not, we made a terrible mistake. Just, we're glad you're doing well, like I'd gone on a long vacation instead of being kicked out into a storm with $20. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another buzz. Mom, please, Aria, we're still your family. Family. That word felt like a bruise pressed too hard. I turned my phone face down and kept working. The call. That evening, as I locked up the office, my phone rang. Dad's number. I let it ring out. A voicemail appeared. His voice was gravelly, older, wearier, but unmistakably him. Aria, we'd like to sit down. Clear the air. Clear the air. As if this was a misunderstanding. As if they hadn't made themselves perfectly clear 5 years ago. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. Ethan's questions. That night, Ethan noticed my silence. He always noticed everything. We sat on the couch in our quiet apartment, takeout growing cold on the coffee table. He took my hand. Your parents reached out? I nodded. He didn't tense, didn't jump to solutions, just asked, what do you want to do? Not, you should forgive them. Not, give them a chance. Not, they're your family. Just, what do you want? No one had ever asked me that growing up. I don't want them back in my life, I said, and it felt like setting down a heavy box I'd carried too long. That's allowed, Ethan said simply. I'm proud of you. At work, the shift in Sienna. Weeks passed. Sienna worked hard, learned fast, even stayed late some nights. She wasn't perfect. Sometimes she second-guessed herself. Sometimes she overcompensated. Sometimes I caught her staring at the $20 bill frame on my wall with a look I couldn't decipher. Guilt? Grief? A new understanding of the damage she'd been protected from her whole life? But she never brought up our parents, never asked for special treatment, never used emotional shortcuts. She was becoming someone I might have liked if we hadn't been raised in a house that sorted love into columns. The letter. One afternoon, Nina placed a sealed envelope on my desk. "Dropped off in person," she said, "by your mother." I didn't touch it, didn't open it, didn't wonder what was inside. Apologies, explanations, excuses? None of it mattered. Words couldn't undo nights on a bus stop bench or the look on Sienna's face through the window when she watched me leave and did nothing. I slid the envelope into my filing cabinet under unread, unneeded. The final symbol. A month into Sienna's employment, I stood alone in my office, staring at the small frame holding the $20 bill. The bill was wrinkled, faded, powerless now. Once, it had felt like a verdict, an exile, a line between who mattered and who didn't. But I didn't need it anymore, not as motivation, not as armor. I removed it from the frame, held it for a long, quiet moment, then fed it into the office shredder. The machine hummed, then spat out thin ribbons of paper, the past, reduced to meaningless confetti. Margaret from Haven House always used to say, "You don't have to keep the things that hurt you to remember what you survived." She was right. My chosen family. That evening, I sat with Ethan on our balcony while the city lights flickered below. Warm air, faint traffic hum, a soft moment of stillness. He rested a hand on mine. "You okay?" "Yes," I said truthfully, because I had. A company I built from the ground up. A team that respected me. A sister working to earn her place. A partner who loved without trying to control. A life that wasn't given to me, but created by my own hands. Some stories don't end with tearful reunions. Some families don't heal. Some wounds close, but only when you stop picking at them. And sometimes, the real happy ending is simply choosing your own boundaries and refusing to let the people who discarded you write the final chapter. I did that, finally, fully, and I wasn't going back.